Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, we're going to be talking about the self-titled EP from Johnny Nocash and the Celtic Outlaws. So I don't normally do full reviews for EPs, but I'm making an exception for this one. And yes, in this case, I'm very much going to be talking about a relatively unknown band that I'm most familiar with from my local scene, just like I did with Sex Master about a month ago. But this group actually falls in line with some territory that deserves some scrutiny and that I've wanted to talk about for some time. The cross-section between country and metal. Now, there's been southern rock on the heavy side for years now, probably decades, but fusing outright metal elements like growled or scream vocals or much more distorted tunings, it's not exactly all that common. And that's not saying it doesn't exist. I've reviewed Panopticon's introduction to bluegrass, folk, and country elements on their black metal albums, and of course you get the groove metal bands that interject more rockabilly elements like Hell Yeah or Volbeat, and towering over the conversation you have the punk and metal elements embraced by Hank Williams III, but let's be very honest here, a lot of these are outliers. They have their own very specific niche. Except not quite as much anymore. More often than not, you're seeing metal artists taking a renewed interest in country, and they tend to treat the genre's legacy with a lot more respect than huge chunks of Nashville, which, you know what, makes a lot of sense, given that metal is also obsessed with its own historical legacy, and thus you get acts like Devin Townsend making Casualties of Cool, or Cody Jinks coming into country from thrash metal, or the deep outlaw country appreciation you hear from a lot of metalheads, which takes us to Johnny Nocash. Now, he's been around for a while. You go to his YouTube channel and you'll find songs recorded going back over a decade ago, but in recent years his material has taken a little more shape, infusing elements of folk and metal to refine and expand his outlaw country sound, which leads to his backing band, the Celtic Outlaws, and this EP. It's got 5 songs, probably a quick enough listen, so how'd it turn out? Well, you know what? It's not bad by any stretch. I can comfortably see Johnny Nocash and the Celtic Outlaws finding their niche and further expanding their sound. They certainly show off a fair amount of diversity and edge on an EP like this, and that says something. But at the same time, for as professional and clean as this recording of this EP feels, it does highlight some issues I think they could refine a little more. There's a solid enough core. I will definitely recommend this, but there are spots that definitely need development if they're going to ever release that full-length debut. So let's start off with that core, because if you're going to this band for any reasons, you're going for these few. Some pretty damn excellent guitar work, both in the acoustic grooves and the electric solos, and Johnny Nocash himself. There is a raw, guttural intensity to his howling delivery that certainly gives him some real gravitas, and he's also capable of easing back and modulating a little more, getting a little quieter, which I did appreciate. And given that the mix can have some pretty effective dynamics on tunes like the Deep Rest and Dagger Road, with the reverb touch guitars and the ability to go heavier without losing that thicker acoustic groove and the grind of the bass that can actually pick up some real tempo, I can respect that. And when you factor in the prominent Celtic folk melodic progressions on Pagan Dance, or the bass-driven outlaw country groove of Love Song that's damn near a traditional country track, you hear a band with a ton of potential to really write some striking tunes. And I'll give Johnny this, for the sort of detail-saturated, outright nihilism and the substance abuse in his lyrics, he can certainly sell different dimensions to his downward spiral, from depressive melancholy to sheer churning rage, to a more sardonic side on Love Song that ends his EP on a surprisingly upbeat note, and I kind of respect that. But around the core of this, there are definitely spots that require refinement, and let's start off here with the production. Dying Day brings in a more prominent bass line at the forefront to match the more acoustic groove, but I found myself wishing that the electric guitars picked up more of the sizzle and intensity and weight to match it, and a big part of that is mix placement. All throughout the track, and especially during the solo, they feel a shade too quiet to really match that deeper groove, and thus the song doesn't quite pick up the firepower or emphasis that it should, especially on the solo or even his vocals. In fact, that's generally my biggest issue with the mix overall. For as hard-bitten and swaggering as I found a lot of these compositions, I kept finding myself looking for more of a ragged edge to come through in more of the guitar work, or the percussion, or the bass, and it felt oddly polished away. This band could use a little bit more distortion, which doesn't remotely match Johnny's vocals. But on the flip side, for as gravelly as his delivery can be, when he's trying to claw for some of the high notes on Pagan Dance, you can tell that he's straining, and not exactly in a good way. I get that he's trying to bring a certain amount of heaviness here, but when your guitars don't quite have the same meat and texture to match your delivery, some of these songs can sound a little bit oversold. And finally, lyrics. I will give Johnny some credit for the detail and character of his writing. I'm not normally a fan of sheer self-destructive nihilism, But between the profanity, the hard drugs, the alcohol, the explicit detail, he takes a very Hank Williams III approach, and you know what? It works. He certainly sells it. Unfortunately, on a technical level, the poetry could definitely use some polish. Lines often feel like they've got a word or two crammed in, it doesn't really fit with the meter, rhymes can often feel dropped, and while the hooks can come across pretty well, the writing can feel a little bit more slapdash than it should. Probably a product of some of these songs being re-recorded from previous projects from years back and not quite as refined, and yet when you've got a 5-song EP, that becomes a little bit harder to excuse. Some of the poetry here could have been tightened up. Look, as a whole though, of course I want to support this project. The delivery has a ton of intensity, the guitar work is legitimately excellent, and the melodic core behind these tracks is really good. And when you consider how many styles they're crossing and really sticking the landing, I've got to respect that. I wouldn't call any of these tracks outright bad, just never quite great, and even then they're on the cusp. And I'll admit, I am being pretty hard on this project, mostly because I see real potential here that a little bit more refinement and polish in the studio could elevate. I like the sonic combinations here. I want to see where Johnny Nocash and the Celtic Outlaws can really push this. And as it is, considering there's only 5 songs here and it goes down pretty well melodically, it was a pretty easy listen, I'm giving this an extremely light 7 out of 10. Recommended for those of you who are curious, but right now, for as much as Johnny Nocash has some good instincts as a songwriter, I want to hear more of them bear fruit. Pretty good though, so definitely give him a chance. Check this out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Bit of a short review, but hey, it's an EP and he's a local guy. I wanted to give him a shot on the show. Beyond that, if you want to buy the record, links in the description below, and I got the poll up there for those of you who hear it. I'm curious where you guys tend to think it might fall when it comes to other country and metal crossbreeds, because there's not a lot of them. I'm curious what you guys want to think about that. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process or might help contribute to support the channel, link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. If you actually want to see the schedule, links in the description below. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.